My name's Jake. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Um, it's really an honor to be here. I've gotten to speak at a bunch of places over the years, and it's always an honor. But this is this is a place I just hold near and dear to my heart. You know, I came through here a couple times. This is where I got sober. It was I came through here at just the absolute lowest point in my life, and this is where my journey to a new life and a life of sobriety started. So I'm gonna, kind of tell you all a little bit about my background and story, and just kind of, how I got from, you know, growing up and then to where it all went wrong, and how I've gotten back to where I am today. So I'm from Houston, Texas. I was, you know, had a wonderful family growing up. Mom and dad were both very involved in my life. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and then for a while she was a preschool teacher. And my dad was, pretty successful businessman who was always involved in my life, and just taught me a very good work ethic, and a lot of high morals and good values from a very early age. I had great role models and great people to look up to. So there's nothing bad that happened, or nothing that shaped me into becoming a drug addict or an alcoholic. And I, like I said, I grew up. I had every opportunity to be successful, and I went to a good school, and everything was great. I remember I was in middle school, and I started to struggle with the workload and the schoolwork and stuff like that. So I got went and saw a doctor, and then ultimately got put on some ADD medication, and it was great, right? I got to take. I was taking an ADD medication, and I all of a sudden I loved to study. I loved to sit around and organize my desk, and you can get a little sidetracked also. So, but it was great. It gave me kind of superhuman powers, in my opinion. But then it also started to make me identify with seeking something external to fix something that was internal. I could so you're having trouble studying, so you go take a pill, whatever it may be. I started to identify with a pill to fix things. So it was also in middle school. I think it was in sixth grade. I tried alcohol for the first time. I had a drink before, or a sip of a beer or something like that. But I was in sixth grade. It was my cousin's house, and they gave us we had a bottle of Mad Dog 2020 strawberry kiwi. So, only the good stuff to start out. And I remember. It's just so good. It hits your lips, and all of a sudden, I just feel this release, and I was like, man, I love the way this makes me feel. And I drank to excess the first time I ever drank, and I was like, I'm going to do this as much as I possibly can. But obviously, when you're in sixth grade, it's kind of hard to get alcohol. So stealing it from parents, or if you have a friend that has an older brother, you can get it. But it was it was tough. And then anyway, so. I tried smoking weed once. I didn't like it. It made me freak out. And I was fine. I got through middle school. It was not a big deal. I got into high school. I played 3 sports. I played football, wrestling, and golf. And I was busy, and I had a demanding workload. So it was it wasn't really affecting my life. I drank on the weekends a little bit or to excess, but it wasn't like a daily thing. And I wasn't doing drugs or anything like that. And, I got through high school, and then I went off to school in Dallas, and went to SMU in Dallas. And one thing that I promised, it had a reputation as being, school with a lot of cocaine and a lot of partying. And I was like, I'm not even worried about that. I'll never do drugs. I'll never try cocaine or anything like that. Except when I got to SMU, the first time I saw cocaine, I did cocaine, right? So, never seen it before. I see it one time, and I'm like, let me try that, So, that became my thing for the next couple of years. I was doing coke a lot, but once again, it wasn't completely it wasn't affecting my life. It was not good, but it was not ruining my life or anything like that. Now, fast forward, probably my second year there or something like that. I got like so backing up a little bit, a lot of my friends were starting to get into a drug called Oxycontin, and I didn't really understand like why people would, go to the length that they would go to get these pills, or like why it was such a big deal, and it was really expensive, and it just didn't seem like I didn't get it, and I didn't try it, and then I got sick, and I went to the campus doctor, and they prescribed me like some, like 30 hydrocodone for a cough, and then some cough syrup with some hydrocodone in it. And so, being that I'm from Houston, I took the cough syrup as prescribed, and like I poured it into a styrofoam cup and mixed it with Sprite, and so I did that, and I think that's where I understood like why opiates are so great and why I loved opiates so much. And at that point, I understood like why people liked OxyContin. My friends were like, "Hey, if you like that, like you would definitely like this." And I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." Like, and I like to snort things. Let me try that. So I tried the Oxy, and that was it. It became a daily thing. I remember feeling like withdrawal for the first time. Like, it was like a Sunday. I was like, man, I feel really sick. And one of my friends was like, yeah, man, that's called opiate withdrawal. Like, well, welcome to the club. And I'm like, oh, what? Like, I'm a little over my head right now. So that goes on for about a year and a half. It progressively gets worse. Doing a whole host of opiates. I start dabbling with heroin a little bit. And then at one point, I go off the summer before my senior year. And I go off to Washington, D.C., and I'm working for a lobbying firm out there. I've got an internship, and all I have to do is I've got to go back to school after this summer, graduate, and then I have like an unbelievable job lined up for me. I know that I'm not going to be able to do this unless I get sober. Not from alcohol or anything like that, but from taking these pills. So like, I used that summer as a time to try to stop. To like really, really, really try to stop. And because I didn't have it, I didn't know where to get it. Of course, so what would happen is I would get really, really drunk, and then I would end up in like sketchy parts of D.C. or Virginia, wearing pink shorts and a polo shirt, and I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, and it was bad. It was a rough summer, and then I get back to, and it's really, really hot in Washington D.C. too. So I get back to school in Dallas, and I'm about to start my senior year. And long story short, I end up, one of my friends breaks his leg, and so he makes the mistake of like giving me some of his pills, and I see where he has them, so I go steal all of them from him, and I get caught stealing them, and then like a few days later, 10 of my friends show up at my apartment, and they're having like an intervention on me, and I'm just like, please don't tell my parents. Like, oh, your parents are already on their way. Like, we already told them. So my parents don't have any clue that I'm doing drugs, or at least I don't think they did. And they show up to Dallas and pull me out of school, and I end up in a counselor's office in Houston, and then I'm crying, and I'm like, I just want to like take Suboxone and like go to intensive outpatient or something like that, because I have a friend that's done that, and I'm like, oh, like that sounds pretty cool. And they're like, no, actually, I think you need to go off to treatment. And they start pointing me in like directions of some places in like California. And I was like, growing up, my family has a place around here, and we used to always pass a place called La Hacienda. And I just remember like when we would pass it growing up, my dad or my uncle or people would be like, hey, if any of y'all misbehave this weekend, we're dropping you off there on the way out of town. So I was like, can I go to that place, that La Hacienda, with the deer in the tree? And they're like, oh yeah, that's a good place. You can go there. I was like, all right. So So cool. So I come up here and, I'm barely remember getting here, but I remember it was 2008, and I walk in, and it's like a Friday afternoon or something, and I have the whole weekend to kind of sleep it off, and I wander into a Monday morning. The Big Book used to be first thing in the morning, and I walk in, and there's this guy named Chris, and he's got an eye patch, and he's like, he's talking, and the first thing he did is he flipped over a table and like screamed at somebody to wake up, like somebody was asleep on the front row, and like I'm in the back, and I'm like, just like jolted awake, like what is going on, and I start to like learn that what is being sold here is that I'm going to need to be abstinent for the rest of my life, and I'm like, but I don't have a problem with alcohol, so I don't understand like why I would not drink. So I do what a lot of people do, is then I just nod my head and I comply, and I lie, like I'm dishonest while I'm in here. I'm like, yeah, I think being sober for forever sounds great. I will be, I'm like, yeah, aftercare, like go to, yeah, I don't think I need to go to sober living. You see, like I got like stuff to do like that. I don't have a job and I'm not in school, but I've got things I need to go do. Like I'm really, really, really busy. And so I talk like, and you're like, whatever, you don't want to do that. That's fine. So I go back to Houston, but what happened was when I was here the first time, I went to everything. I listened, and I took in a lot of what was being taught, and especially the Big Book groups every morning, and I loved it, and I loved the idea of recovery. I just didn't really need to be a part of it because I was not one of y'all, and I didn't need to be sober. But what I did do was, a seed was planted, and I went back to Houston. I liked meetings. Like I found some good meetings. I found a sponsor who was really, really nice to me. And I think we did a fifth step, and that was it. And I chaired some meetings. And I was just kind of like, I don't really know why I was doing all this, probably to like make myself look good to my family. Like, hey, Jay's really trying really hard in AA. And I felt great. I really did. I was sober for a little while. I felt, better than I'd ever felt. Like my mind was starting to clear up. Like I was gaining people's trust back. It was a good thing. So one night I remember I was at a friend's house, and I had I think I was close to graduating from school. I maybe had like 6 months left. I was going to U of H now, and in Houston, and like things were going great. It was like, okay, so you don't have too much time left till you graduate. Like I've been looking for jobs. I'd like found some potential good jobs to do when I got out of school. Like I said, I was gaining a lot of trust back in my life, and people were wanting to be around me again. I was enjoying going to AA meetings, and I was hanging out with a group of friends who were like, some of my best friends, and they're some of my best friends today, and they're not alcoholic, they're not drug addicts, and they are not in the program, and they respected the fact that I couldn't drink and I couldn't use drugs, but I was hanging out around it a lot. And I remember I was at their parents' house, and I walked into the bar area to get a Dr. Pepper, and like I'm going to get a Dr. Pepper, and I see a bottle of vodka sitting there, and there's like no thought given to it, and like I'm just like pouring a bottle of vodka into a styrofoam cup and mixing it with orange juice, and I'm drinking. And there was like, it's hard to describe. Like when I've told like my parents that, they look at me like I'm crazy, because they're not one of us. So they're just like, they're like, okay, yeah, that's what, whatever, however you want to explain it. Like it doesn't make sense to them, but like, it was like almost like an out of body experience. Like there was just I knew this was probably not a good idea, but I was like, I'm going to do it eventually, and I'm going to do it anyways. And so I drank, and, nothing bad happened to me. I didn't go to jail. I didn't smoke crack. I didn't do heroin. I got drunk. I felt an enormous amount of relief. And, I was like, I'm good. I learned my lesson in rehab, and I'm never going to do any of those pills again. And I'll be fine. Until one day I was like walking I was at school and I saw this guy that I went to high school with, and he was like, "Hey, you want to smoke some weed? Like, yeah, if you ever want weed, I can get you weed." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I don't really want any weed, but can you get any of those pills, man?" And he's like, "Yeah, I can get you some pills." So like that, once again, like it's a bad idea, and there's no thought given to it, and I start taking hydrocodone, and eventually I graduate from school. Like things are still like going decently well. I mean, I'm taking a lot of pills, but I'm like holding it together. I get a job. I somehow pass a drug test, and I get a job working in oil and gas. And I'm like, for somebody coming out of, I mean, period, like anybody, I was making a lot of money as a 22-year-old, almost 23-year-old kid. Like I was doing very well, and I started to build up a lot of external things around me, like car, girlfriend, house. Like things were, like I said, things looked good, but I knew that I was in a lot of trouble. Like this pill addiction was starting to get out of hand, and I was also drinking like a full blown alcoholic. So this continued on for a couple of years, and then like my last year out was when it just got really really bad. Like I was drinking a lot of vodka every single day. I was taking a ton of pills, and then I would try to stop all the time, and I could maybe get through withdrawal for a couple of days, and then it'd be a Tuesday night, and I'd like take Xanax or something like that, and then like all of a sudden when I take Xanax, I feel like I need to go places, and so like it's a perfectly good Tuesday, and like Xanax, you need to get in the car and you need to drive to the third ward, and you need to go buy heroin, like, or pills or something. So I go down there, and I meet this wonderful lady named D Trey, and she goes by D, and she spotted me at a gas station. She was on a bicycle, and she was like, "Hey, like, you and me." And so I open my Tahoe, the back, and it opens, and she puts her bike in, and it's like, "What do you need?" And she takes me to buy pills, and she likes to smoke crack, and so like I'm watching her smoke crack, and I'm like, okay, so I used to like cocaine a lot, snorting it. No, let's not smoke crack. So anyways, like another time I'm down there, and like we're waiting, and I'm like, I like cocaine, she smokes crack, and it's probably the same. So I smoked crack one time, and that was like for like 8 months, and it was really really bad, and I would disappear for periods of time, and people didn't know where I was, and I was yeah. So it was, like I said, things were bad, and I just like I just couldn't like think of like any way out, and then it was May of 2012, and my godfather, who was like a huge influence on my life. He was like probably, he was mid 50s, and he was up here at his family's place, and he just like suddenly dropped dead of a heart attack, like just suddenly, and this event just like completely spun me out of control. Like I went on this like run where like like it was like I lost a father. It was just like it just sent me into this tailspin, and I got into a really 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 dark place. I'd been like on the road for work a lot, and then I'd be back in Houston with tons of time off, and at this point I had all this time off, and I took a leave of absence from work. I started seeing like a therapist who I went in and saw and like lied to every single time about like what was going on, and like I'm depressed, but I leave out that I'm taking like all these pills and drinking and smoking crack, which probably contributed to my depression. So I take a leave of absence from work, and like the things that I'd learned here in 2008, like kept that you could recover from alcoholism, that we can go on to be sober and like lead a happy, successful, like purpose-driven life. It just, I mean, Chris's like words just rang in my head the entire time, and I found my way coming back up here, and I knew somebody that had a ranch, and I was like, hey, can I come out there and work horses for y'all for for a few months and kind of like gather myself and like figure out what I want to do with my life. This was a ranch west of, or just south of Lakey, and they were like, sure, absolutely. And so I went out there, and my plan was to isolate myself from the outside world. Like, there's no cell phone service, there's no TV. It's beautiful out there. There's, horses, and I used to like work in a horse stables back, like, way back in the day. So like, I just knew, like, or in my mind, this was like a way that I'm going to go out there, I'm going to detox, and then I'm going to like try to go into Kerrville and go to these meetings at the outpost, and I'm going to try to get sober. And see, and what happened was, is I got off of the opiates and the cocaine, and, I just remember like I was in the outpost parking lot on a Sunday, and I'm just like, I'm drinking, and I'm by myself, and I'm crying, and I just like, I can't walk in, I'm just like, I'm terrified that like, I'm not gonna be able to do this. And I don't really know like what was going through my head, but it was just like this defeated feeling where it's like, I cannot keep continuing on this way, but I'm too terrified to walk into this meeting and ask for help. And of course, like I didn't walk in, and I eventually got a call from work like a day or two later, and they were like, we're going to let you go. And long story short, I drank a lot that night and ended up getting arrested in Kerrville, and I spent the night in jail, and my parents bailed me out. They drove from Houston to bail me out. I called my mom at like 3 a.m, and I called my parents' house. She answered, and I'm like, hey, like, so I just got pulled over. They're saying I was driving drunk. I don't really know like why they would say that, but if you could maybe come up here and get me, like that would be great. And they click, and I'm like, like, because they'd always told me they'd never bail me out, and like when I'd never been arrested, so I don't really know how any of this works. And I'm trying to talk to people, in the cell, and like, so how do you get out of here? Because like the door's shut, and I like really want to go. And they're like, well, did you call a bail bondsman? I'm like, what's a bail bondsman? And they're like, yeah, you're probably screwed. And I'm like, okay. So everybody makes bail except me, and I'm like, but like, let me go. Like, and so and then like an hour later, they come in and they're like, you made bail, and I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, your mom's outside. And I was like, oh man, I don't know if I want to go out there. And if y'all like could see my mom's like about a little bit shorter than me, like kind of put together blonde lady, and she was just like, I walk out there, and she's standing there with her arms crossed, and my dad's in the car, and he like can't even look at me, and like they take me out to their place, and like we're just, I try to like talk them into like, hey, so like I think maybe I should come back to Houston and like live with y'all. And my dad's in the corner and just like is so upset and can't say anything. My mom just like, just gave it to me. She was just like, we don't think we can be of any help to you, and like frankly, we really don't want anything to do with you right now. She just hit me right between the eyes, and it's exactly what I needed. I was so excited because like in a way, because I wanted to get sober so badly, and I just had a feeling that like somehow, I could go to treatment, I could do something and get better, but I was still grasping at anything but treatment. Like please, like let me just go home. Like anything. It's just such a like weird deal in your mind. It's complete insanity. Like treatment is just down the road, but I'm trying to like, will you let me go to Houston and live with you? And they're just like, absolutely not. And so I, called up here, anyways, got here, and this was July 25th of 2012, and I walked through here, and it was hot, and I was just like, I was completely defeated. I was like a little over 200 pounds. Like I was just like, I was a wreck, and I was, my belly was distended from like drinking so much. Like I was like on my last legs, and I just like knew this was my last shot, and that I was going to do anything that was asked of me, and I was going to just like for once in my life try as hard as I could and give it my all and take people's suggestions and do what was asked of me. Because like my pattern is always that when things get hard, I just quit, or I never really try my hardest. Like I'll go to a certain point, and then when it gets difficult, I quit, and that was like my pattern my whole life. And so I was like, I'm going to see this through, and I'm going to do whatever is asked. I'm going to donate the next year of my life to seeing if this works. So I walk in. I don't really remember a lot about being in treatment here. It was a blur. I had Steve Marcy is my counselor, and I remember the first day I met with Steve, and he baited me into the question of like, why do you think you're like this? And I start talking about my mom and my dad, and he's just like, I won't repeat everything that he said, but he was like, basically like, that is not why you are the way you are. Like, he's like, you're the way you are. Like, he talked about my, being spoiled, being entitled and all of that. But he's like, at your core, you're an alcoholic and you're a drug addict, and you need to, you need to get busy on this, or you're going to die. And so he started having me read the big book and outlining the chapters. And then he also was like, you're staying in sober living, like when you get out of here. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And he's like, man, that was easy. And I was like, yeah, well, I have a friend in Kerrville, and I used to do drugs with him, and I think he's here and he's doing pretty well. And he's like, oh, you know that guy? And I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, like, he's like, let's call him. So he was gone through here as well about a year earlier, and Steve was his counselor as well. So that was kind of like that first like moment where it was like my friend came out here and met with me, and it was like the first time I saw somebody that I knew how they used, and I knew how they drank, and I knew that they were like not big God people or anything like that before they came in here. And I believed him. I trusted him when he said, and I asked him like, what's the secret? Like, how did you do this? And he's like, well, AA. And I'm like, yeah, I know AA, but like, really, how do you do this? And he basically was like, it's about the steps, and that's it. He's like, you're either going to do this and you're going to be sponsoring people. He's like, you're going to get out of here and you're going to start drinking again. And, and he was talking about God, and I just like it was just like I just had there was like a glimmer of hope that things were possibly going to be able to work out. I eventually I got out of here. I was in here for 29 days. I went to sober living here in Kerrville, and I got out, and I got a sponsor. My first sponsor is here tonight too, and he, that guy, he got me busy, and I had some other friends that like just a good group of guys that were all like involved in AA and involved in service work and sponsoring a bunch of people, and they pulled me with a vision and just like kind of like pulled me into their group, and were like, hey man, like, if you want to do this, like, this is what we do. Like, the first thing we're doing is like, we're going to make tacos for an AA convention, that's going to be in town and like later this week. So it's like 5 a.m, like I get picked up from my sober house. So like we go roll tacos at the Outpost for like 3 hours, and like, and I start like, so one thing that happened is when I left treatment here, I did not feel good. I was terrified. I knew that I was going to get high again or get drunk when I got out of here. I just knew it. Like, people like often are like, I feel so good. I feel great. I'm getting out of treatment, and I feel so good, and I don't even think about drinking anymore. It's a delusion that we fall into. Like, the fact that I'm not thinking about drinking has nothing to do with me not drinking. And it took me a long time to like understand that, because like, if I'm not safe and protected and the mental obsession strikes me, it can strike when I'm not thinking about drinking, when there's not a cloud on the horizon, when things are growing great, when things are going bad. Everybody always wants to talk about like, well, I feel really good, like I feel good internally, and therefore I won't drink. And that gives delusion that we have power over alcoholism, which we do not. If just because I feel good and just I think I can manage my condition well enough that I won't drink, that's completely the thinking is not right. I have to have a clear path to God so that He can come in and remove the mental obsession for me to use. And like things can get bad in my life, or things can be going really well in my life. And if I'm not safe and protected in the line of God's will, then I will. If that obsession strikes, I will drink again. I will use again. So when I got out of here, I was not spiritually fit. I had not done any step work. I was not sponsoring anybody. There was I was a sitting duck essentially, and I was going to get high unless something happened. And I remember I had to take somebody to get their car that was 3 hours away, and on the way, every single exit I wanted to exit and get some beer, because whenever I drive, I like to drink. So I'm glad this is being recorded. So at every single exit, I wanted to pull over and I wanted to get drunk, and it was just I was like, how am I gonna live like this? And I remember I called my sponsor, and he's like, yeah, man, it's because you haven't done any work. So we get back, we start moving through the step work really quickly, and I think I was 45, 50 days sober, and I had my first sponsee, and I was sitting down with somebody and teaching them step one, taking them through the book, talking about taking them through the step work, just how I was taken through it. And that's when it happened. I did not have a white light spiritual experience or burning bush experience. I had a lot of kind of moments where I finally felt good, and just kind of flashes of hope or whatever it may be. But I was starting to feel better. But I remember the first time I sat down with somebody and listened to a fifth step, it was as if time stopped, and I was kind of just disconnected, and just listening, disconnected from the outside world, and just listening to that one person, pour out all their darkness to me, and just taking it through, taking them through the fifth step. And it was after that, that for the first time in my, in the past several years, I've realized that hey, I think there's a chance that if I keep doing this, I'm going to be okay. And it was that was one of the most powerful experiences of my sobriety, and especially of my early sobriety. Just the idea that, hey, this works and this is possible. And luckily, because of the people I had surrounded myself with, and AA groups and the accountability groups I was involved in, I knew to not let off the gas, and I kept on it, kept sponsoring, and finally, right around, I got to a year sober. I was sponsoring a lot of guys. I was living in Kerrville. At that point, I think I was managing a halfway house, and I really was there was a lot of stuff that was starting to build up, and starting to block me off. I was sponsoring a lot of people, but I was not doing any prayer and meditation. I was not working with the disciplines of 10 and 11. And essentially what I was doing, although I was sponsoring, I was relying on human power as something to keep me sober, and I was relying on the fellowship of AA to keep me sober. My spiritual connection from God was, I was blocked off. Things were building up. Resentment was building up, and essentially, I was as you could, one way to say it is I was rolling the dice of my sobriety. And I had a friend that had gotten out of a 90-day treatment center and came here and relapsed, and went back to that treatment center. And on his way back up here, he relapsed on heroin, and we ended up finding him dead in an apartment, in a motel in Kerrville a few days later. And that just something about that, it hit me in a way that it was oh my God, that's going to be me. I'm going to get drunk again. I'm going to get high again if something doesn't change. Because like I was starting to feel that misery start to build up. I was uneasy. I couldn't sit still. And I ended up getting heavily involved in really step 11. I started a very disciplined prayer meditation routine. I started doing a written evening review. I did another fourth and fifth step, and got to see some truth around some things that not been left off of a fourth step on purpose, but just like they were not at the forefront of my mind the first time I went through the step work. And this cleared me up, and then I ended up moving down to South Texas for a job, and there's not as much opportunity to sponsor down there, and there's not as many AA meetings or service commitments. So although I did have service commitments the entire time I was down there, and I had people that I was sponsoring, I really had to. I got a new sponsor who introduced me earlier, and we got heavily into prayer, meditation, and doing written evening reviews, and just taking the big book literally line by line, and just almost becoming robotic with it. And that the 2 years that I was down in South Texas doing this, it absolutely was the biggest growth period of my life. I went through a lot of challenges and a lot of ups and downs, but I was continually forced to turn to the step work, and turn back towards God and everything that had worked for me every time. So, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is guys, when you get out of here, if wherever you go, if you can find a 12-step meeting and get plugged in and start find a sponsor, work through the steps, and start helping people, getting a service commitment, sponsoring people, just being a member of. Just going to meetings is not enough. But if you can get heavily involved in this, you will go on to live a happy and successful life, however that may look. You will have a sense of purpose. And like I said, when I got here, I'd gotten out of jail. Things were not. I did not come in here on a winning streak by any means. And fast forward to today, I have been given so many gifts back in my life. I'm invited home for Christmas every single year, and people are actually happy to see me. My parents love to be around me. I'm not nodding off in my mashed potatoes anymore or anything like that. They're people actually come to me for advice and look to me as a role model and a model person. Whereas prior to 2012, I mean, I was just I was a low life junkie who just took from everybody. And I always like to think about when I came in here, I was talking to my sponsor about it earlier. We were talking about he was talking about love being an action word. And if I wanted to know what I loved back then when I came into treatment here, if I looked at what my actions were that I loved myself, I loved alcohol, and I loved drugs, and that was it. So while I could could verbally say that I loved my parents, or I loved loved a girlfriend or my sister or anybody like that, it's the truth is I did not love anybody but myself, drugs, or alcohol. That's what my life revolved around. And then today, there has been a shift where my life revolves around serving God and helping others, and because of that, I have a sense of purpose, and I have there are a lot of great external things that have been given to me now, but it's not it's just a different outlook and perspective on how life is. I just urge all of y'all, when y'all get out of here, to like I said, find a group, get involved, and if you work the steps and do everything that's outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you will stay sober for the rest of your life. And if you don't, you will ultimately drink again if you're lucky, end up in treatment again. Anyways, that's all I have. Thank you so much for letting me share.